And I suspect if you look at the Case-Shiller data, Case-Shiller kind of looks at that median housing value, but also takes into account apples to apples sales. Like it looks at how much did this same house sell for a couple of years ago as now. I have a feeling that what we're going to see is that there's been a much smaller drop in apples to apples comparison sales over the last year. That houses that were selling for $300,000 or $400,000 last year are still selling for pretty close to $300,000 to $400,000, maybe down 1 or 2 or 3%, but definitely not that 12%.
Welcome to the Bar Down Investing Show. Here are your hosts, Kyle Wilson and Jay Scott.
Hey there, and welcome to another episode of the Bar Down Investing Show. I am your host, Mr. Kyle Wilson, Ashley Wilson's husband, once again with Mr. Jay Scott. How's it going, Jay?
You almost forgot your intro there, didn't you?
I almost did. I almost did. I got thrown off by the misters. I kept calling you Mister, so I felt like I should be Mister at some point too.
How you doing?
I'm okay. You got any wins for us?
Do I have any wins? Yeah, I'm over COVID.
Over COVID?
Is that a win or is that a loss?
Did you have? You told me you were sick, but I didn't know you had COVID.
I didn't know I had COVID either. I assumed I had the flu, and then like all the symptoms go away. I wake up yesterday. I'm feeling great for the first time in like a week, and then I get to lunch and I realize I can't taste anything. So I think that's one of those classic COVID symptoms. So now I'm wondering if that flu I thought I had might have actually been COVID.
That must have been good for your diet, though, not being able to taste anything.
We're going to find out on Friday, but I have a feeling I'm going to crush it this week.
I didn't know that COVID existed in Florida. I thought like it just kind of stopped at the border and never made it to Florida.
If we don't test for it, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that's why we had so many issues in the beginning, is because we were testing too much.
Exactly.
Cool. We got anything good to share on the scorecard?
Big number on the scorecard this week.
Uh-oh.
We have had 50,000, not 50, not 50,000, but 50,000 impressions on our YouTube channel.
What does that mean? What's a YouTube impression?
I have absolutely no idea, but it's a big number, and I needed something for the scorecard, and it popped up. So
you just wanted it to be a good number, so you saw 50,000. So you're like, let's roll with it.
I mean, it's got to be better than 20,000, right?
Okay, well, maybe I'll have to Google that and see what that actually means, whether or not it's impressive.
Next week, I'll tell you if 50,000 impressions is a good thing or a bad thing. I have no idea.
Okay, perfect. All right, best part of the show, Rock updates. The Rock's daughter is set to compete in her first WWE match. So big news there. She's 21 years old. April 1st, she's competing in a tag team match. Long time coming, because I just found out apparently she signed with WWE back in 2020, but had some injury issues, had to put it off. But now she's all ready to go. So tune in on April 1st. Watch The Rock's daughter carry on the legacy.
Hulk Hogan. That is the guy I was trying to think of about 6 weeks ago.
You thought of you brought it up halfway.
I did, but it came to me again. See, I know
every
wrestling.
time I bring up wrestling, you're going to think of Hulk Hogan.
Hulk Hogan. There it is. Okay, so what's her? So do they still have fancy names, or is she just the Rock's daughter? Like, what do we know her as? I
have no idea. That'll be interesting, because so the Rock's, I think the Rock's grandfather and great grandfather were both wrestlers, and his grandfather was named Rocky, was his wrestling name.
I think
it might have been his dad. I don't know. I know he comes from comes from a line of wrestlers, and so maybe carrying on the line, maybe she's Rockette. No, that wouldn't work.
I like it.
Or Miss Rock, or I don't know, Rock Hard. Who knows? But anyway, tune in. I'll tune in. I'll watch her. I'll see how she does. All right, headlines. We got a lot of headlines here. I don't even know if we're going to be able to make it to the issues list if we get too long on this on the headlines. But first headline was, we literally put this podcast off a day because we wanted to see what was going on with the rate hike yesterday. And it turned out to be kind of a nothing burger, to be honest. It was just, everyone expected the quarter point. Powell didn't have a lot of fun stuff to say. He was kind of just like, oh, we're going to continue to monitor stuff. We know things are happening, but we'll see what goes on. And so it was kind of just a letdown, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, everybody kind of knew what the most likely outcome was, and it's exactly what happened, that quarter point rate hike. I think as of the day before, it was priced in like 90% chance of a quarter point rate hike. So nobody was surprised. But like you said, a lot of people were looking to see what exactly was Powell and the Fed going to say. Everybody was ready to parse every word, every sentence to try and figure out like where things are headed from here. And basically, it was the most boring, generic statement you could have expected out of them. Really no information. All we know is that there was a quarter point hike, and now we're in wait and see mode. So I think a lot of people are assuming that this could be the beginning of a pause. We knew that if we got back down to quarter point hikes, that would be kind of the end of the road for hikes, or at least the proposed end of the road for hikes. So maybe this is the beginning of the pause. Maybe there's another quarter point coming up, but it's definitely an indication that the Fed is willing to slow down. But we don't know what signals they're looking for to decide what the next move is. And in terms of how the market reacted, I mean, it was kind of crazy. Everything was up a lot yesterday, and then the announcement, things were still up, and then everything dropped, and now today everything's up. And so once again, I think people are just confused about what's going on in the economy, and they don't know how to take this. And so I don't know.
Yeah, it's pretty funny if you put a side by side of Powell speaking, and then you put like the markets next to it with like the S&P or like the 10-year treasury, like as he says, like they ask him a question and it goes down like 10 points, and then another question goes up 10 points. So it's pretty funny how much people like hang on his every word, and then it kind of normalizes the next day. But yeah, if you really want to dive into what he said, he did leave the door open for maybe there could be a pause versus the previous meeting. He still implied, we still have to, there's still rate hikes coming ahead. He did quash any idea of people thinking that there's going to be any rate cuts the rest of this year. But we also know that the Fed's not a very good predictor of their own actions. So we'll take everything with a grain of salt with that. The next major headline was that annual home prices fell for the first time year over year in a decade. So we've seen month to month house prices fall, but this is the first time that if you look at February this year versus February last year, this is the first time that house prices have fallen in over a decade. So we're looking back at financial crisis time.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the surprising news here is that it's taken this long to see that year over year. But then again, I mean, things were pretty good up until we started hiking rates last year. So I think what we're seeing is that right around the time we started hiking rates last year, we saw that downturn or that plateau in prices, and then that led into a downturn towards the end of the year. And I have a feeling that the next several months, at least, we're going to see that year over year number continue to fall, because last March, April, May, June were all pretty rough. I think last month it was 1.2%, that February drop. So it'll be interesting to see if that speeds up or not. I don't think it's any question about whether or not we continue to see month or year over year declines. It's just a question of how big declines. So that 1% from February to February just it's not that interesting. I mean, certainly any decline is big news, but 1% decline isn't going to be materially impactful on the market. But if we see a March number of 2 or 3 or 4% and April, May numbers of 3, 4, 5%, that becomes interesting, and that could lead us into a situation where the perception that the housing market is really starting to decline could be a self-fulfilling prophecy, and we could see some bigger losses result from it.
Yeah, if you look at the prices in February versus their peak, they're actually down 12.3%. So that is significant. And even if you look at, so you have 1.2 or 0.2 or whatever the percent was down year over year in February, that's obviously an average. So there'll be some places where it was still up. But if you look at places, I think the highest down terms from February to February were like San Jose and Austin, and they were like 13.1 and 12.4 year over year. So there are definitely some places who have seen a lot of things get hit. But That's not surprising. As you said, rates have been way up. We got fears the economy is going to downturn, so people will typically hunker down a little bit and don't want to move. So, yeah, we'll keep an eye on that and see if we get another next month. Same thing.
So you mentioned that the peak to now drop, the total drop since the peak of the market is about 12%, but I'm actually not a fan of that data point simply because it's a different type of house that's selling right now. Typically when the market starts to downturn or soften, what we see is the first thing that starts to soften is those luxury sales. We see a lot fewer luxury sales. And so the average price of houses that sell in general are going to be a lot lower. We see a lot more $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 houses selling, not $2 million, $3 million, $4 million houses selling. So the fact that we've seen a drop in median home price by 12% doesn't really mean that the houses that were selling for $300,000 a year ago are selling for 12% less than that. It just means that we're seeing a lot more of those lower price houses selling. And I suspect if you look at the Case-Shiller data, Case-Shiller kind of looks at that median housing value, but also takes into account apples to apples sales. Like it looks at how much did this same house sell for a couple of years ago as now. I have a feeling that what we're going to see is that there's been a much smaller drop in apples to apples comparison sales over the last year, that houses that were selling for 300 or 400,000 last year are still selling for pretty close to 300 to 400,000, maybe down 1 or 2 or 3%, but definitely not that 12%. So when you hear people start quoting that 12% drop from the peak, take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah, and there's a lot less sales going on too. I think the article quoted that February sales were down 22.6% from what they were in February the previous year. So the data is, as you said, it's not apples to apples, but along the same lines as the market's cooling, home buyers are actually putting down less money on homes, which I found was surprising.
Yeah. So I know you read this article first. Why don't you summarize what exactly is going on there? Because I thought this was tremendously interesting.
Yeah. So the crux of the article is the median down payment in January was only equal to, the average was only equal to 10% of the purchase price, which seems really low to me. Obviously, your standard mortgage is 20%. But that's down from 13.6% the year before, and during its peak in May, during the pandemic, obviously. But that was 17.5% was the average down payment. So apparently, just on average, people are having to put down less on their homes than they did before.
Yeah, and I think the thing that a lot of people don't realize is that there are a lot of people out there that put down bigger down payments than they need to. So I know the first reaction when I saw this headline was, are banks dropping their down payment requirements? And in reality, what's happening isn't that the banks are dropping their requirements, but that people are no longer putting down a lot more than the banks were requiring. It used to be that people might have to put down 10, 15%, but they were choosing to put down 20 or 30% because we were in a crazy, crazy competitive market where a seller was only going to accept an offer if there was a really large down payment or something like that. Whereas these days, a lot less competition. So people are saying, oh, bank only requires 10% down. I'm only going to put 10% down. And sellers are accepting those offers. And so it's just driving down the down payments. But it's still pretty interesting. It begs the question, how does this impact the market in a few years when people who are buying houses today have less equity? If we see a downturn in the market next year or the year after, we could start seeing a lot of people who otherwise might have still had some equity now be underwater.
Yeah, that's true. And the stigma too, because I remember years and years ago, I was back when I had my real estate license, I helped Ashley's cousin buy a house, and he had an approval for an FHA loan. And we struggled because we were in one of those markets where it was multiple offers on every single house. And whenever they saw that FHA one, we had to be $10,000 more than the next buyer, just because that the stigma of those FHA, those low down payments, they're more strict requirements. They have different inspection requirements. Same thing with like a VA loan. All these low down payments have all these other requirements, and sellers are more reluctant to take them. Well, these days they might be the only offer. So people will use those FHA loans, and they will be the winning buyers, and that'll bring that down. And also another trend we're seeing is people are, instead of putting more down for their down payments, they're also taking that money and putting towards rate buy downs as well. So that might be skewing the data a little bit because people are using that money just to have lower payments monthly.
Yeah. 100%. And so again, I think it's going to be interesting to see how this impacts things down the road as the economy changes. If we look back and we say that some of these changes that we're seeing in buyers' tendencies and methodologies today, if they contribute to potential issues down the road.
But apparently it's not completely stopping people from flipping homes, because did you know that there are a bunch of celebrities that actually flip homes in their off time?
I did know that. So,
well, so I'll start with the list. I'll start with a list from the article. And so the list started with Diane Keaton, Jeremy Renner.
Yeah, he's my favorite.
Sophia Richie. And then it did mention later on the article Ellen DeGeneres, because apparently Ellen DeGeneres has done like 20 homes. She's flipped like 20 homes. Apparently Jeremy Renner has flipped 20 homes. I looked into Sophia Richie, and she like did it once. But she made a lot of money, so it made a bunch of news. But
who's Sophia Richie? Lionel Richie's
It's Lionel
daughter?
Richie's kid, yeah. And she got famous because she hung out with Paris Hilton on that one show.
Okay. Got it.
But yeah, apparently even celebrities, they want to make a quick buck flipping houses.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I knew the Jeremy Renner one, and the reason why I loved his story was apparently he's been flipping houses for a lot longer than he's been kind of this mega Hollywood
A-list
star.
actor.
Yeah, and I remember hearing a quote from him when he got really popular saying, "Hey, why are you still doing this?" And he was like, "Well, this was always my backup plan. This was always like the way I was going to make money because I never expected to make it big as an actor. And so it's still kind of my number one business model." And so he thinks of himself as a house flipper first and a luxury house flipper first and an actor second. Maybe that's changed, but that's what it was a few years ago.
Yeah, he's definitely not a snowplow driver anymore after what's going on there.
Well, wait a second. You missed the most important, the biggest name celebrity that flips houses.
Who's that?
Really? Vanilla Ice.
Oh, yeah. Well, he had a TV show. So that
he had a TV show and everything.
Yeah, I guess you can count him, but that's what he does now, right? Like he doesn't actually do any other acting or singing or anything like that. Like that's what he does, isn't it?
Wow. Not a Vanilla Ice fan, it sounds like.
Oh, everyone's a Vanilla Ice fan. When he came up with absolutely no help from anyone else with the beat for Ice Ice Baby, then you knew he was a genius.
Didn't Queen rip that off?
Yeah, I think it must have been. No, I heard it was just a little bit different. If you listen to it, it's just a little bit different.
There was an up note at the end instead of a down. Yeah.
He did a celebrity or did a interview about that one time.
Yep.
Okay, keeping with the buying homes, in Texas, buying a home with crypto is coming to Texas. So starting in April 2023, Texas real estate buyers, sellers, agents, and brokers can transact in real estate, residential and commercial real estate with cryptocurrencies on a site called myelisting.com. What do you think of that?
No, I think it's all a hype. So, I mean, what does this mean? And I haven't read the article, so maybe there's more to it than this. But the way I see it, if you're going to buy real estate today, things haven't changed enough that the process really changes. You still need a closing. You still need title insurance. And the only thing I'm guessing that's changed here is instead of somebody taking their crypto, converting it to cash, buying the property and then converting it back to crypto, is that they're basically saying we're going to accept crypto at whatever the current value is as funds for the deal. So it changes the funding of it, but I don't think it changes the transaction. Am I missing anything?
They're touting that anyone in the world, it makes it easy for anyone in the world to do it, and they can get transactions done in as little as one business day. And so it kind of does go to the trend of eventually you would think like transacting in real estate is archaic right now. Like when we're trying to buy a commercial property, there's a billion things you have to sign. Literally, you sit there for hours signing just paperwork to your eyes glaze over, all of these different things. And these should be all online, on blockchains, on all these different things. And transactions should be a lot quicker. It's just taking some time to get there. So yes, okay, is this a bit of a shtick, transacting in cryptocurrency, get it done in one day? Yes, you could probably, right now you can get a normal transaction done in under a week, probably 4 or 5 days if you want. So is it really a big deal? No, but it is showing, I think, a bit of a trend of what's to come, that things are changing in as far as real estate transactions.
Look, I'm the first to hope and expect that over the next couple of years, the way we buy real estate is going to change completely. I expect that the blockchain is going to have a big impact on that. So crypto to some degree is going to impact it. So I'm hopeful that this is the first step in that process. But I guess we're just going to have to wait and see.
Yeah. Okay. Well, back to some more troubling news, though. Touching back on before we talked about consumer credit and consumer, how it's kind of ticking up and we might have an issue there. Well, subprime car loan delinquencies are surging apparently at the moment. They are the highest that we've seen. They're above 2008 recession numbers, above 6%. And apparently these low income households are falling behind on their car bills, is what it's telling us.
Yeah. And so we use the term surge, or the headline used the term surge. And that's an accurate headline. I mean, this is numbers from December, so we are a couple months behind on this data. But what we saw in December was that we went from about 2.5% delinquencies or like non-payments on these subprime car loans to over 6%. So huge increase. And literally, like, what's that? 1 in 16 now subprime car borrowers are delinquent. And so, not saying that this is indicative of a meltdown outside of kind of that industry. But anytime you start to see cracks in the subprime lending industry, whether it's real estate or cars or anything else, it's an indication that people at a certain socioeconomic level, those at the lowest socioeconomic level, are starting to feel the pain. And that's kind of the backbone of our economy. That's the backbone of our country. And when everyday working people start to feel the pain and start to fall behind on their bills and start to miss their payments, that's a precursor to things getting worse. And so if anything, I see this as kind of a leading indicator that we're seeing some cracks in the economy, especially at the lower socioeconomic levels. And that could snowball and ultimately lead to what we're expecting sooner rather than later.
Yeah, there's a couple other things to take into consideration when you're looking at these subprime car loans. First is, I don't know if you remember, but used car prices absolutely skyrocketed during the pandemic. So we're talking like sometimes up like 20, 30, 40%. So when you take into consideration how expensive these used cars were, people obviously had to spend a lot of money on them and their loans are going to be big. And you might get into one of those things like 2008 where people were upside down, where they bought a house for a super high price and the house wasn't worth as much. And you'll see that with the cars. They might buy the car for $30,000 and now it's only worth $20,000. Are you really going to keep making payments on that? So that little of that might be going on. And plus subprime loans, regulators took care of it a little bit, but you still have these predatory loans in that space, and with real high fees and higher rates and expensive add-ons and stuff like that. And they're kind of designed for more people to fail sometimes, because they already collect their fees and whatnot. So you got to be careful with these subprime loans. I think I saw a news article the other day that New York was actually going after one of these subprime loan car lenders, and it's an ongoing case. So that's another consideration. But how about we do a couple more fun headlines here?
Let's do it.
First, well, it's not fun for JPMorgan Chase, but I thought it was a funny headline that JPMorgan Chase thought they had $1.3 million worth of nickel stored in a warehouse. After closer examination, it was a bag of stones.
Yeah. And at first it was a funny headline. The problem is the article didn't offer too much more than that. It sounds like JP Morgan thought they bought like all of this nickel, which according to the article accounted for about 0.14% of all nickel inventories available in the world. Put it in a vault. And then at some point, somebody noticed that it wasn't really nickel. It was just bags of rocks. And so nobody knows if like JP Morgan messed up or the people storing it messed up or somebody stole the nickel and replaced it with rocks.
They're still investigating. It was 54 metric tons of nickel. So it wasn't just a few bags. It was 54 tons. So it was stored by LME, and they had a contract with this company called Access World, and it was in a warehouse in a Dutch port city of Rotterdam. And so, but apparently they're still investigating. They know exactly what happened, but apparently Access World is probably going to bear the financial burden of the mix-up rather than JP Morgan Chase, just because it was their responsibility to protect the store of the metals. But it does beg, was this an Ocean 11 thing? Like where someone was like, just saw the opportunity, broke in here and just replace, because how does it end up being a bag of stones? No one's going to willingly store 154 tons of stones. So like, how does this even happen?
But here's the other way to think about it. Like 54 tons of nickel worth 1.3 million. I'm not saying $1.3 million isn't worth doing some effort, doing some work. But like, is $1.3 million enough to like get somebody to figure out how to move and hide and then resell 54 tons of nickel? I feel like there's got to be a better like pound to.
I don't know. That's maybe a couple days work though. Like you have a big truck. That's a couple days work, and I don't know, 1.3 million. Sure, even if you get half of that, and it's a couple guys who had warehouse jobs or something, and they just saw the opportunity. I don't think it's out of the question.
Well, I've got some mulching to do around my house, so I know it sounds like you don't mind doing that type of heavy labor. So
hey, for 1.3 million, sure, give me a week's worth of work, and I can make $1 million. Yeah, I'll get onto that. All right, and I had some feedback of when people were talking about. I told someone we were doing a podcast, and they said, you know what's the best thing to do on podcast is top 10 lists. Everyone loves top 10 lists. So I was like, okay, let's give it a try. So instead of a top 10, I found top 20. But okay. You'll see why I picked the top 20, because the headline was, here are the places to live with the best weather in the United States for 2022 and 2023. And I picked the top 20 because 11 of them are in California.
I was just about to ask that question.
Literally the top 6 are all in California, ranging from Santa Barbara down to Los Angeles. Number 7 is Honolulu. So once again, just right in the same price range of anybody wanting to live in the best places. So I thought I would skip ahead past all of the outrageously expensive areas and find some normal areas. So strange, I would not have picked this, is on the list after all the Hawaiis and California. The top one is Oklahoma City.
Oklahoma City. I guess I've never been to Oklahoma, but I always assumed that it was kind of like a dusty country.
Well, no. So the requirements of this were you need a lot of sunshine, but it can't be like crazy hot. So like moderate temperatures, but a ton of temperature. So Oklahoma City, and then right behind it, a couple spots away, was Tulsa, Oklahoma too. So Oklahoma getting the love.
Maybe we should be looking at investing in Oklahoma, because I'm looking for some nice places to travel.
All right, and then following up, once again, skipping a couple Californias, we get to Atlanta.
Okay,
which you have experience with.
Yeah,
but you did leave to go to Florida, which is interesting. And then following up, then again, a pet project of mine before that you guys didn't want to invest in, Fayetteville, Arkansas.
Interesting. Fayetteville, like, why Fayetteville versus, well, maybe it's the only big town in Arkansas. I'm not that familiar with Arkansas.
It's probably, well, no, it is. I think it's it's definitely the biggest MSA when you consider Bentonville and those other Springdale or whatever the other areas are there. So you're probably right that it was just Arkansas and that's the biggest city. But then also mixing in, rounding up the top 20, we have San Juan, Puerto Rico, not surprising.
Yep.
And then we have sneaking in at the bottom, we got a couple South Carolinas. Greenville, South Carolina, and Spartanburg, South Carolina, which also isn't that surprising to me.
So what I'm hearing is Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and
did not make the list. I was shocked.
And Sarasota, Florida, wasn't on the list. No place in Florida was on the list. I guess it's too hot and muggy.
Yeah, so for opposite reasons, I'm guessing. So this is year-round temperature. I'm guessing Florida gets too hot and Pennsylvania gets too cold to make the list. So
yep,
average them out. We have a really good place. Perfect. That was pretty long. So obviously I don't think we're going to dive into any issues. So you got anything showing up on the to-do list?
All I would say on the to-do list is, once again, everybody loving our drunk real estate episodes. We released one about 2 weeks ago. We've got another one coming up in 2 days. You're going to love this one, especially for, those of you that want to hear about, being a fighter pilot. So one of our drunk real estate guests was not just a fighter pilot, but he was a fighter pilot trainer in the Air Force. So meet him and meet our other guest, who is equally as awesome, Thursday on the next episode of Drunk Real Estate. Tune in.
You're going to love it. Triple love for that.
Stop making fun of me. I'm self-conscious.
How would you rate this meeting?
This was a fun one. I'm sad that we didn't do any issues, but I like doing the headlines. The headlines are fun. So this was a fun one for me. I'm going to go with an 8.75 on this one.
Yeah, I thought it turned out really well, but it took a lot of prep work with all those headlines. So I like your rating, but I'm going to bring it down a little, probably to an 8.0.
Okay, 8.0. Never would have guessed that one.
All right, you got a quote for me?
Nope. You're going to give me a quote. You're good at this. Come on. We've set a trend.
Well, this isn't, this is kind of funny, but keep it along with the bank trend. Everyone's talking about banks and how banks run and stuff. And there was a good quote from, actually, I lost who the quote was from. I got to cut off. So I apologize, whoever this quote was from. But the quote is, if you owe the bank $100, that's your problem. But if you owe the bank $100 million, that's their problem. So
I know who that quote's from. I believe that's a JP Getty quote.
JP Getty. There you go. Cool. Thanks for bailing me out. And thanks for everyone else for sticking through this entire episode. Bunch of headlines, and hope it was a little bit entertaining for you. And as Jay said, we got some drunk real estate coming for you on Thursday. So tune into that one as well.
You're going to love it.
All right. See you next week.
See ya.